Madam, take 10 count and start.
Okay, so now, sir, from now, I need to
I,
take, or after your instruction, sir.
yeah, start from
Oh,
10 count.
okay.
Hello, madam, mute. You can start,
Good
madam.
evening. Okay, sir. Good evening to one and all present here. A warm welcome is never complete without warm words. I, Renita Angelin, Assistant Professor, Department of English, on behalf of Untitled College Management, faculties, staff, students, and the Department of English, warmly welcoming you all to the first day of webinar series on Approach, Application, and Appreciation of Language and Literature. Anna Violet Arts and Science College, started by Nesarathanam Educational Trust in the year 1997 with the vision education to all, is imparting value-based and comprehensive robust education to all. Our goal is to impart creative, useful and need-based education. The ultimate aim of our institution is to seek, strive and succeed. We are working hard to deliver holistic quality education and empowering students. Our college provides various platforms by organizing various programs, certificate courses, sports, culturals, and various other activities to make students versatile. Being a NAC accredited and ISO certified institution with a short span of existence, our college has developed into a pioneer institution in providing quality education. The Department of English works with a goal to impart need-based education, language and communication skills to students to learn and excel in their career. The department, imparting literature since 2010, provides opportunities for concentrated study of language and literature and also provides a zeal artistic knowledge to appreciate the language in its present form. In addition to the academics, our department periodically arranges special lectures, workshops, and conferences stressing on the essentiality of effective communication through English in the changing global scenario. In order to get these a sense of possible scope of methodological innovation in understanding literature, our department has organized this webinar series on how to approach, apply, and appreciate language and literature. Pedagogic innovation in the contemporary scenario is under transition, where every approach becomes temporal. Today's webinar on practical approach to understand literature will introduce you to few interactive and innovative approach, its differing qualities, strengths, limitations to understand and study literary work. Without further ado, let's begin our session. During the session, you can raise your doubts and questions in the chat box. Welcoming the guest with a smile is the kindest, noblest action. It is a courtesy of the host to give a warm welcome. Emily Dickinson once said, "The soul should always ajar, ready to welcome the ecstatic experience." Now, I request Mrs. Devika Prema, Assistant Professor, Department of English, to welcome the enthusiastic learners who are ready to acquire newfangled approach to understand literature and also to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. B.V. Saraswati, who is a sculptor of human character, a seasoned scholar and navigator of this flagship of knowledge. Over to you, Devika Prema, ma'am.
Thank you, Renita. It gives me immense warmth and pleasure to grace all of your presence in this webinar on approaches, applications, and appreciation of language and literature. Before we begin this program, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to all of you who sincerely committed to make this program a success. I take this privilege to welcome our chairman.
Madam,
just hold a second.
திருப்பி
Start பண்ணனும். ஒரே ஒரு second.
Hold a second, please.
There's a technical
We'll
problem.
start from beginning.
2 minutes.
There's a
Renita,
technical
I think
issue.
you
Just
need to
we'll
start
start
again.
technical issue.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, sure, ma'am, sure.
Okay, I think you need to start. Sorry, ma'am.
Okay.
It's all right. It's all right.
The private. Public வந்துச்சு ஸ்டார்ட் பண்ண சொல்லுங்க மேடம் ரெனிட்டா மேடம் யூ கேன் ஸ்டார்ட் ஃப்ரம் ரெனிட்டா மேம் ரெடியா இருக்க சொல்லுங்க ரெனிட்டா மேம் ரெடியா இருக்க சொல்லுங்க
Okay, sir.
ஸ்ட்ரீமிங் தான மேம் இருக்கு இங்க எனக்கு லைவ் ஆகுது மேம் ரெனிட்டா மேம் யூ கேன் ஸ்டார்ட்
உங்களுக்கு மட்டும் இப்படி பண்ணி விடுற பத்தியா நீ
Okay. Good evening to one and all present here. A warm welcome is never complete without warm words. I, Renita Angelin, Assistant Professor, Department of English, on behalf of Untitled College Management, faculties, staff, students, and the Department of English, warmly welcoming you all to the first day of webinar series on Approach, Application, and Appreciation of Language and Literature. Untitled Arts and Science College, started by Nesarathunam Educational Trust in the year 1997 with the vision education to all, is imparting value-based and comprehensive robust education to all. Our goal is to impart creative, useful and need-based education. The ultimate aim of our institution is to seek, strive, succeed. We are working hard to deliver holistic education and empowering students. Our college provides various platforms by organizing various programs, certificate courses, sports, culturals, and various other activities to make students versatile. Being a NAC accredited and ISO certified institution, within a short span of existence, our college has developed into a pioneer institution in providing quality education. The Department of English works with a goal to impart need-based education, language and communication skills to students to learn and excel in their career. The department, imparting literature since 2010, provides opportunities for concentrated study of language and literature and also provides a zeal artistic knowledge to appreciate the language in its present form. In addition to the academics, our department periodically arranges special lectures, workshops, and conferences stressing on the essentiality of effective communication through English in the changing global scenario. In order to get a sense of possible scope of methodological innovation in understanding literature, our department has organized this webinar series on how to approach, apply, and appreciate language and literature. Pedagogic innovation in the contemporary scenario is under transition, where every approach becomes temporal. Today's webinar on practical approach to understand literature will introduce you to few interactive and innovative approach, its differing qualities, strengths, and limitations to understand and study literary works. Without further ado, let's begin our session. During the session, you can raise your doubts and questions in the chat box. Welcoming the guest with a smile is the kindest to noblest action. It is the courtesy of a host to give a warm welcome. Emily Dickinson once said, "The soul should always ajar, ready to welcome the ecstatic experience." Now, I request Mrs. Devika Prema, Assistant Professor, Department of English, to welcome the enthusiastic learners who are ready to acquire newfangled approach to understand literature, and also to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. B.V. Saraswati, who is a sculptor of human character, a seasoned scholar and navigator of this flagship of knowledge. Over to you, Devika Prema ma'am.
Thank you, Renita. It gives me immense warmth and pleasure to grace all of your presence in this webinar on approaches, applications, and appreciation of language and literature. Before we begin this program, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to all of you who sincerely committed to make this program a success. I take this privilege to welcome our chairman, Chevalier Dr. N.R.D. Dhanapalan, Secretary Mr. N.R.D. Prem Kumar, Joint Secretary Dr. P.E.R. Premchand, our Principal Dr. Kamala Balakrishnan, and Vice Principal Mrs. Zafir Solomon. I extend a very warm welcome from the Annai Violet family to Dr. B.B. Saraswati, our guest speaker for the day. Welcome, ma'am. My warmth also extends to the welcome the heads of various departments, faculty members, viewers, students, our technical team, and to all the participants across the state who have gathered here for the very first webinar of the English department. It is a great honor for me to introduce and welcome our chief guest, Dr. B.B. Saraswati, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Chevalier Thomas Elizabeth College for Women, Chennai. She completed her PhD in 2017 from the University of Madras. Her area of research was Black British literature. She has attended conferences and presented papers, have published research articles in journals, and a chapter in a book, have guided PG projects on contemporary research areas ranging from Black feminism to Instagram poets and their poetry, have been part of the organizing committee for the student conference that is held every year at CTT College, and have been a part of the editorial committee as a reviewer in the publishing of the conference papers. Once again, I welcome you all for the first day webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, I request our guest speaker, Dr. B.V. Saraswati, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Chevalier T. Thomas Elizabeth College for Women, to take over the session.
Good evening to all present. I'm very happy and honored to have been part of this webinar series, and I'm very, very privileged to start off this series by the Annai Violet College English Department. You've been very kind in introducing me and presenting me to the audience. Without further ado, I think I will just move into the presentation. The topic that I have chosen, as you know, is simple ways to understand English literature. English literature is in itself a vast field, and when I say simple, it is going to be trivializing it. But I am just going to point out a few pointers. I'm going to give a few pointers with which you might be able to navigate this mighty ocean. So 3 practical approaches to understand English literature. So this is what I have brought it down to. And I'm pretty sure it is a mixed crowd, I have been told. It is a multidisciplinary student audience. Therefore, I thought I will not go deep into the subject, but will keep it general. At the same time, present a few more things which are not normally visible to the non-English literature major students. So what is literature? Literature is first and foremost a composed body of work. What kind of work? Written work. It is recorded. It is a product of the imagination. It contains uniqueness in thoughts, emotions, feelings, that holds advice, knowledge, and wisdom. It has a specific quality in form and structure, written in a language of the time it is created in. What I'm trying to say is, if it is written today, it will be written in the language that we speak. And it will be recorded in the kind of language that we reserve for formal writing. When Shakespeare wrote it, what was prevalent in his time was recorded. So when we parse what has been written, when we take it apart and we read into it, then we understand what each author has experienced and is trying to pass on to the future generation, or how he has imbibed what life has taught him and is presenting it through his imagination in whatever that he is writing and recording for posterity. So this we consider literature. For the three practical approaches that I have chosen to present to you today, one would be the study of the social, political, and literary history of England, because I am focusing mainly on English literature, but as examples, I would show you others as well, and the legends of and the ways in which they have had an impact on the writers and their works. So basically what I'm telling you is, if you take a work and you want to read it, understand it, and derive the fullest joy and message from it, then you should know something about when it was written, why the message that has been written in it is written, and what were the other presentations during the time when this particular author was writing. If he has taken some allusions, he has referenced to something else that is beyond the book, which he considers that everybody, when they read it, will understand, what are they that he has referenced? And will that be in any way important for us to understand the main message? Will it give us more joy? Will it make us understand in depth what he's trying to say? Is what the study of social, political, literary, and the legends of that country will help us understand. The second approach would be to study the literary forms. As I already said, written work has a particular form and structure. So if they choose to write in one particular form and structure, then we give that a name and we categorize that writing under a subheading. So if we know something about that particular subheading, then we will be able to understand what the further action will be, why he has chosen that particular medium, and how he is going to bring out his message. And then the third approach would be the importance of the evolution of English language. Now, English language, as we know it, we have received this language from another country. Before that, how did that language come into being? When did it start? When did it become the kind of language that we are speaking today? These kinds of things will also enhance the effect that we derive from a work of art that we take up to study. So first, this is a very vast area, because social, political, literary, everything put together, the history as such, that word is going to put off a lot of people. So what do I mean by, why should you study social, political, and literary history, and how will it have impact on the writers? The political history, will it actually show what the writer is trying to say? Will I be able to understand what the writer is trying to say without knowing the political background of that time, without understanding the social background of the time, without knowing who the contemporary people, the writers of my chosen writer are? Will it in any way bring down the enjoyment that I'm going to derive from that work? Yes. if you think that you can take one writer in exclusivity and read only his work, you will be reading only half of what the writer is trying to tell us. The social background and the political background will definitely contribute to the vision that has forced the writer to write or to create a work of art. Therefore, we need to know the social and political background. The literary history would be what the other writers of that same time period are writing. How that is going to influence our chosen writer, how this chosen writer is going to differ from what everybody else is doing, why is he choosing to do that, all these things will show us why we have to know the background of the author, the social, political, and literary history of that time will help us understand the work in detail. For example, this is very, very obvious when we go to the American history. The part that you see in dark red is the area which is normally referred to as the southern region of America. So when a writer is saying, I am from the South, when an American writer is saying, I am from the South, it does not simply stop with the geographical location South. There are so many things involved, and only if we understand the history and the social, political history of that area, will we be able to understand the works of these writers such as W.B. Du Bois, Langston Hughes, James Baldwin, Toni Morrison, and Maya Angelou. Now, if you notice, they're all Black American writers, and the reason why they have to be brought here is because I wanted to show how the history of America, the socio-political history of America, is essential for us to understand the Black American writing. Similarly, when we take Canada, the country as such, if you can see the map, there is a very little area which is totally green in color. The whole expanse of land is harsh, to say the least. And if we understand the geography of that land, we will be able to understand Survival, the book by Margaret Atwood. It is essential. A geographical knowledge of the country is essential for us to understand and appreciate what Margaret Atwood is trying to say. Similarly, Australia, which is an island continent, the center part of it is a complete desert. So if we are to read Patrick White's Wars, then we should understand the country, the geographical location, how Australia became Australia. And then if we read or watch this Rabbit Proof Fence, which is written by Doris Pilkington Garimara, she is an Aboriginal writer from Australia, and this physical, geographical image that we will have to carry in our minds when we read that work. The cultural history of Australia will also play a part in it, in the sense that there was this season when they took away the children and brought them up to be considered as better human beings. That is referred to as the stolen generation. So when I simply come and say that this author belongs to the stolen generation, immediately you will have to assemble all these thoughts together and say that Australia, the 60s and 70s, 50s, 60s and 70s era, and the stolen generation, all of this will fall into place. And then when we read the work, we understand how importance the background plays. So coming back to England and English literature, this image should always be in our minds. So this is a small island next to a very huge land mass, which is the continent of Europe. Being such a small country, this country has managed to rule the world for quite some time. So how did it manage to do that? And what were the influences that came in or it took out and gave? All of these things will still be essential. And the social and political history of England is something that is intertwined, and one reflects and leads the other. So one cannot bifurcate social history and political history, because it's always a consonance. It is one leads and the other follows. So we shall normally start with the medieval England and the Norman conquest, which occurred in 1066. So the Anglo-French language, the French cultural domination of Europe, the French coming into England and becoming the courtly language, and the establishment of the West Saxon dialect. Now, all of these things are mere indications as to what you will have to understand by the fact that it is medieval England. So if we take a work of, let us say, Geoffrey Chaucer, then we understand that because France played such an important role, that he had written a quarter of his works in French. How important French was is shown through his work. So if we understand why an Englishman wrote in the French language, then we will understand the reflection of the social and political history in the work. And then there was the struggle for power, and then when they signed the Magna Carta and everything settled down, we still have the War of the Roses and Henry the Sixth coming in. So when we read Shakespeare's plays, the historical plays referencing to Henry's reign, then we need all this background to be able to understand what he is trying to say, what he is talking about, why he has created that character the way he has created. So the background to the study of the Henry plays by Shakespeare needs to have a thorough knowledge, or at least a simple knowledge of the British social and political history. And then we have Henry VIII and his break with Rome. Now, this started the Anglican Church. So there are so many works till date that talk about how the Anglican Church is the most important center of religious congregation in England. But what was the existence before this? So if we understand that it was just because Henry VIII wanted to marry another woman, and since the Catholic Pope did not allow a divorce, he had to break away with Rome. This resonates in so many other art as well. And we see that a simple thing is made a big, huge affair when after all this, he dies childless and Queen Mary takes over. By which time we understand that the geographical boundaries have expanded. People are setting out on lots of explorations, and they find new world, and they come back and they report. And there is an impact on literature, because literature starts talking about the existence of other people besides their own race, and this allows them to form an idea of themselves. So the beginning of the idea of a national state takes place around this time. Then comes Elizabeth I, and this is the period that we know, because we all start with the study of Shakespeare when we start with English literature. And here we are in the Elizabethan times, how she managed to bring about a relative peace between the fight between the Catholics and the Protestants. She had a relatively stable rule. She did not have to do anything like Queen Mary did, who was also known as the Bloody Queen, because she kept beheading anybody who would not follow her religion. And Elizabeth decided to walk a fine path between the Protestant and the other uh, group of people who did not want to follow the new religion set by Henry VIII. So we move on to the Civil War and Cromwell. So this period again is something that is the time when John Milton was writing, and therefore, if we do not understand what was the social and the political background during his time, we will not be able to understand what Milton is trying to tell us. So, when Cromwell became the ruler, the whole uh, aspect of entertainment changed. He was not a fan of theaters, so theaters were closed. Therefore, people were unable to stage their plays, and they were forced to think of some other ways of bringing out their creativity. And during this time, Milton started writing, and what was most welcomed was the piety and the idea that God is all powerful. It is not man, but God. These are the things that were able to uh, find resonance with the ruling power, and therefore that was what he was writing. So if we understand the background, then it will be easier for us to appreciate what Milton has written. So once monarchy is restored in England, once Charles II is restored to the throne, everything changes. It is not the Puritan age anymore, and therefore it is very free for people to celebrate. The uh, theaters are again back in action, and we understand again how things have changed only when we understand the socio-political history. So we have the court also willing to take part in dances and plays, and we have Johnson's masks, and we have Shakespeare winding down his career and moving forward into the Restoration comedy. So the Restoration comedy, how and why it came to be, because it reflected the idea of Charles II and the court, and they wanted that kind of happy, open, unrestricted enjoyment of life. Therefore, we see all the Restoration comedies being presenting the same kind of joie de vivre that Charles II wanted. And whatever happens in the court is reflected in the literature as well. So when we see that and this, we are able to understand it more, we're able to appreciate it more. And then we move on to Queen Anne. By this time, as I had already mentioned, people had started going out and talking about new countries and new things, and new discoveries were made. Things that were not available in England were brought back to England, and one of which was the coffee from Turkey, and coffee houses were established during Queen Anne's time. So that is where people were standing around and drinking coffee, and that place, the coffee house, is the birthplace of Sir Roger de Coverley by Addison, who creates him and shows us how he goes around from place to place, listens to all these snatches of conversation, his own experiences, and it is this great Sir Roger who writes essays. So when we understand the importance of the history of Queen Anne's coffee houses, then we understand how the essays have become part of English literature, how that uh, form of writing, the structure of writing, was born. So it is again a necessity. We had periodicals being printed. The printing press was in operation. The periodicals were printed, and short essays were written, and people were reading it out aloud, and they were enjoying it. So this is unlike the poetry that had been the dominant form of literature so far. It is slowly but surely changing from here. So we get all this information only if we get the history of the society as well as the political background. And then we have the Industrial Revolution. So how does the Industrial Revolution impact on general life? So whatever happens at home when we create a few things for our own personal use, that is small scale industry. But when it is large production, it is mass production for distribution, then it requires mass people to work on it. A huge number of people have to move from one place to another. So this we see depicted in the Victorian England, especially in Charles Dickens' work, when he writes about how young boys and girls are forced to go to work. They are the chimney sweeps, and he writes a few of his books based on such young children's lives. Fagin is an immortal English literary character. And sir, please, sir, may I have some more, sir, by Oliver Twist is another immortal line. So these are all representations of the Victorian England, and how will we understand it and get more information as well as enjoyment from the work is by understanding that there was more to the times, and Charles Dickens was merely taking a photograph of one particular aspect of it and presenting it in his works. So the imperialism that started out during the rule of Queen Victoria, as I said, it's a very small island, but then we see it started ruling the entire world, and the sun never set on the British Empire. At one point of time, it was so huge. Everywhere the sun was shining, it was always the British Empire. So there was no need, as they said, for anyone to say that we don't have a presence in that part of the world. Britain was present throughout the world. And this presence, this global presence, forced her into many wars. The First and Second World War, which was on a global scale. It was very difficult for Britain to stay away from it and not participate in it. And all of those nuances, they are the essence of so many films, so many books. So every time you read a war book, a World War book, or any Nazi based book, then you will, if you see the background and understand what it was during that particular time, and then you go back to read the book, you will understand how authentic it is, or how difficult it is going to be when each and every person was trying to get his work recorded for posterity. And today, Britain, where and what is the position? So we are hoping that they would be part of the European community, but then they have decided that they're not going to be. They have pulled out, and now they're going to continue to be their own masters. So what about the colonialism that they started and left traces of the legacy that they left all over the world? Now we have people of people who have migrated from other regions where colonialism had been happening, and they're all living in Britain. So everyone has some history that has contributed to the making of Britain as we know it today. So that will also give us more understanding of the works if we read, as I had done for my PhD thesis. It was Black British literature. So which means people who do not belong to the race of the Britishers, but have come to Britain from other countries and are sitting there finding a living and are writing. What history did they bring to that particular country? So each book is by itself a history. So each thought and expression brings out something from a place that is not England. So if we are reading that book, we need to know something about each and every book, and thereby will we derive more pleasure, more understanding, comprehensive, total understanding of what that particular writer is trying to say. So for ease of studying, we have these periods divided in literature as the Middle English period, the Elizabethan period, the Neoclassical period, the Romantic period, Victorian period, and Edwardian, Georgian, and modern period. So when you go to a book and then it says this work was written during the Elizabethan period, then you will automatically be able to slot the whole thing into the reign of Queen Elizabeth, the time when Shakespeare was writing, the university wits were writing, and it was the time when there was an war between the Protestant and the Catholic religion. So everything falls into place when you get the history and geography correct, and when you just take it out and say, okay, Elizabethan period, I know this is the background. Therefore, armed with this information, if I go and attack this book, then I will be able to understand a bit more and derive a lot more pleasure out of it. So, for example, the Romantic period. Now, this time frame is during the time when the French Revolution took place. So when we say the Romantic period, we cannot not think about the French Revolution. We also have to think about, they are looking for influences from the medieval age, that is beyond the Renaissance. They went further back and they tried to bring back what the classics were, and they were trying to get their influence from them. So these are just a few names of important writers that I have mentioned here. And yes, I forgot to mention Spenser's poetry. So he writes epithalamion, prothalamion, and there is a reason why he wrote that. So if you understand the social and political history, then when you read them, you understand what he was trying to say, why he was writing that poem. And the drama which progressed from Miracle Place to Marlowe, there was, again, religion was the important part of life. Therefore, the church was holding Miracle Place and Morality Place for the edification of the Bible. They wanted to teach the Bible to the masses, and therefore they had these plays which were enacted by clergymen, and the layman came to see, learned something, understood God's greatness, and he went away. Little by little, that also changed. It became, from being religious, it became secular. So if you understand the Tudor scene, then you will be able to understand the progress of the play also, the history of the drama. So the neoclassical age, where I mentioned the Restoration Comedy, and then Dryden, John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress. We have Joseph Addison and Spectator, all of the periodicals at that point of time, and the birth of something called the novel. That was a longer prose work that was just being born at this point of time, which later on becomes the staple of English literature. So we see Richardson's Pamela, Henry Fielding's Tom Jones, and Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. Till today, Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice holds a very important place in something called the chick lit. The girls normally tend to read this with more panache than with the boys. So we see how we are able to take that book and adapt it to the other eras, because we understood the Romantic age, the way Jane Austen was writing, to whom she was writing, about whom she was writing, all of this, because we were informed by the social and political background of her time, and therefore we derive more enjoyment from her works. Moving on to the birth of philosophy and how human beings had to think of something that would be applicable to human life in general. These kinds of thoughts also come in when there is too much anarchy, and life loses its meaning, and the peers are looking for something more. So we have uh, the literature as the only tool which brings all these to the fore. As I said, romantic movement where Wordsworth was very much influenced by the French Revolution. He liked the idea of individuality. He liked the idea of lack of artifice and being close to nature, being one with nature. That is the reason he deifies nature, and he says that the city is not the place where you can find that kind of oneness with the divine. The spiritual oneness that you want to find, he says, will be available only when you go away from man and the clutter of humanity, going away and being free in the countryside. So we also see the influence of supernatural and superstitious beliefs in Coleridge's Ancient Mariner. All of this information that we gather from outside the literary text helps us understand the literary text, and this is one of the practical approaches that I am talking about. So when we move on to Victorian period, Charles Dickens' Pickwick Papers, he's recording what is happening. He is trying to bring in whatever he sees in society for the others to act upon it and correct it. So these things, if when we are reading it, we might not be able to think of it as anything more than just a record of this author's ideas. But when we read it with the knowledge that that was how the situation was when he was writing it, then we understand the difference between that situation and today's situation. Is there a difference? Has it gone forwards or has it regressed? Is there progression or is there regression? So these kinds of things we are able to understand. So it gives us more enjoyment. So it's a practical approach to understand literature. And then we have drama of George Bernard Shaw. He is, in my opinion, a demigod, where he brings almost every topic onto the stage via his plays, and makes the people understand what the situation is without making it in any way a sermon. He just puts it all over there and shows the follies and foibles of people and leaves it open. If you were like that, will you change? So you need to understand the background and you understand the society, and then when you come and read his plays, you will be able to relate both and laugh at a lot of his jokes, basically. Similarly, Oscar Wilde's Importance of Being Earnest. Only if you understand the lifestyle led by the privileged class during Oscar Wilde's time will you understand what he's trying to say in that particular play. The Edwardian modern period, I have not gone into much because I thought I will be running out of time, and I think I am. Just going to mention, this was the time, the beginning of the time as we see it now. Okay, the psychology and the approaches to literature have become a lot, because literature has now become a subject to be studied. It is not just something that people write and read and enjoy and discuss about. It has now become a subject of study, and therefore there are approaches to study it. So there are all the critical approaches coming in now. So it is not just the beauty of something, it is not just the message that we try to receive from it. We are now looking at the psychology behind the writing and why the author has written something like that. Until now, we had been seeing as to what the author has been writing, and why he was presenting it to us in a certain fashion. But now we are going to look at why is the author writing, and how is he going to express himself, and what is running in his mind when he's doing the writing. So this part of it, I think, is what we live in today. So, for example, if you are interested in Chetan Bhagat, the latest book, if you have read it, I'll just stick to the book that everybody must have at least heard of, the movie Three Idiots. It is 5 Point Someone. So the 5 Point Someone is a reflection of what is happening in society today, right? So only if you understand that, everybody wants to get into the IIT. Nobody wants to look at the other courses anywhere else. You know, that mentality, I think it was prevalent during the time when I was coming out of school. When I was getting into college, this is what I said: you either become a doctor, you become an engineer. So these were the only two options present. But today it is not so. So if you read that book, you should be able to relate it to the time that he grew up in, because he says that is his story. So when he says that these were the two avenues there, then today it is not like that. So the students of today might not be able to understand the pressure that was present at that point of time. So this is the scenario today, and if you understand what is, you know, present just before you, and correlate it with the text that you are reading, then it would be a very enlivening experience. So this is also very contemporary. If you see the picture on the left, if you have identified it, then it is from the movie by it's a huge Marvel comic spin-off, which has resulted in a conglomerate of merchandises. So this, if you want to see, if you want to understand, if you want to enjoy, then you should know what this is. The picture on the right, what that is Valhalla. It is actually the legend of the Norse country, which is just above England, who came in. The Vikings came into England and pillaged them very often. And some of them stayed, some of them went back. So when they were here, they had their own ideas of God and super being, and whatever they had, that has also passed into the collective mythology of England. And if you understood Valhalla, the Valkyrie, the Thor, and the family, and the machinations, then you would have enjoyed that movie more. Okay. And then the druids, that is the magicians, they were all present in England for quite a number of years. If you were to read Aztecs comics, you will see that druid over there, and there'll be Obelix, who is very, very huge. So when he was very young, was supposed to have fallen into the container which had potion, a very powerful potion, and therefore this man is very huge. So when you look at it, Aztecs and Obelix are very close friends. You don't understand the combination. Why are these two very close friends? Then you realize these were the general beliefs, the legends of England, and therefore they have been portrayed like that. Then we have King Arthur. He is one of the legendary standards in English literature. So King Arthur was supposed to have been a very brave warrior who tried to unify England and create a country. He was the head of a round table wherein he had other such warriors who were all equally accomplished and brave. And he had a wonderful, beautiful wife called Guinevere, and one of his knights, Lancelot, fell in love with her. So now this whole thing is represented in so many other stories. And when we see those stories and when we read those books, if we do not know the legend of King Arthur, if we do not know the legend of the Round Table, we are not able to understand and enjoy. We do not understand the significance of a warrior, the meaning, the full meaning of the term warrior. So these things are all contributory to the enjoyment of one particular work. And similarly, Beowulf is also a warrior, and that is the first recorded literary work that we have in English. It was passed on orally, and finally somebody has recorded it. And so we start our English literature, the first work we started from Beowulf. And then Robin Hood and His Merry Men. Again, this is such a popular legend that everybody in every country has somehow heard of. The good-hearted robber who robs from the rich and gives it to the poor. I'm sure everybody, one way or the other, has seen one movie or read one book or heard of one story that is happening all over the world, right? So how relevant is this knowledge of legends for you is when you start playing these video games. I think I took these pictures from Google Play Store. So you have this Camelot, and then you have King Arthur. So do you even know what it is that you are playing? The rules will tell you that you have to go find this, you have to go find that. That is based on his life. That is based on where he gets his Holy Grail. He goes in search of the Holy Grail. So he has to find all these things, and then he will assemble them together, and finally he will be led to the Holy Grail. So all of these things, when you do it, do you understand what is behind it? Then you can achieve more. So literary forms, I told you about what the literary forms are. So the basic forms that we classify them into, the structure is poetry, drama, and prose. So poetry has a prosody, a kind of a language in which you have to write, and there are the different types of poetry, and each one has its own uniqueness. So if a person is writing using one particular, let us say, dramatic monologue, we have Robert Browning, and why is he using that? He is combining drama as well as poetry, and he is speaking as though somebody is there to respond to him, but the whole thing is a monologue. Nobody is going to talk to him, reply to him at all. So there are so many such devices. So all of these things for a non-literary person is a bit too much, but when you understand the basic divisions of poetry, then you will be able to appreciate it more. And since poetry is inborn, I think you will be able to easily grasp that also if you are a budding poet. And then we go to the drama. So many different kinds of drama there are, and we know only tragedy and we know comedy. A tragedy, somebody's going to die. Comedy, everything's going to end well, and there is an expectation of a celebration in the form of a wedding. Okay, and then we have absurd drama. So that is Waiting for Godot. They are both waiting. Life is such that we don't know what is going to happen, but we continue and we wait. The status quo is there, and we are hoping for something will turn up. Godot will come. So that is the kind of ideas that you have to understand from the social history, which will help you with the understanding of a drama. Again, there are the elements, there are these devices, all of these things. If you can just pay attention to, you will be able to imbibe them, and then derive more pleasure from the work that you've set out to explore. Similarly, novels, short stories and novels, which are prose. We have plot, narration, characterization. So when you watch a movie and you come back and you discuss it, you normally start off with this thing. The first shot is like that. In the climax, it is like that. These are the technical terms that you're using. And as you're saying it, you have already established a background for this entire movie. So similarly, if you understand all these things and then you start reading a novel, it is going to enhance your so again, I come back to the three practical approaches that I set out to explain. The social, political, and literary history of England, which will help you. The literary forms, which I rushed through, and the language as it evolved from the beginning. So these are all just allied, these are related, associated, connected. If you do all these outside things, the background things, then when you go to the main text, it will definitely give you a lot more to understand and enjoy. So the things that are related to the life of the author, associated with the period of the author, and connected with the particular events that influence the author. So these are the things that you will automatically know when you take up a book and start reading it. So language, as I was saying, the evolution of the language. There are so many ways in which to go about it. So I will leave this to another session. Just this one example as to why language is important is in the play Much Ado About Nothing, in Shakespeare's time, nothing was pronounced as noting. So in that play, if you see, there will be a lot of instances where people note things, and what they note is absolutely unimportant, and they create a huge hue and cry out of it, and it is not important to the movement of the action. So there are almost 70 times the word note, noting, not noting, everything comes in that play. And there's absolutely no requirement for people to jump about when there was nothing in it. So the noting and nothing, the meaning of that word changes with time. Therefore, in his time, when it was said like that, you understand it better now, why he named it Much Ado About Nothing. Today, English is the global language. It is the language of business, commerce, communication, science, and travel. So bearing all this in mind, when you read works from people who are not born to the English language, you will understand that they have acquired this language as a second language, and therefore their perspective will be different, and that will give more depth to the work that you are reading. So then how should all this be integrated into the study? Just to appreciate the literature and derive pleasure, to analyze the human mind and marvel at its creativity, and to acquire knowledge and attain wisdom, which is what we want to read a book for, to be able to learn something from it. So as we do all of this, hopefully these three practical approaches will help in the maximization of pleasure and the derivation of knowledge. So let this be the beginning of a beautiful journey of discovery. All the best, and thank you for this wonderful opportunity. With this, I complete my show. So thank you.
Thank you for your excellent presentation, ma'am. Since it is a multidisciplinary platform, I'm sure the audience would have understood about the simple ways to understand English literature. Now we'll move to the question and answer section. Ma'am, I have got few questions from the chat box. Can I read it aloud, ma'am?
Yes, please, please.
Yes, Subhashini Ramachandran has asked, ma'am, you have mentioned that practical approaches like social, political, and cultural context can help us understand literature. But what about confessional poems of Sylvia Plath and Anne Sexton?
Yes, again, if we understand the background of Sylvia Plath and the era, as I said, the psychology comes into play. So when we listen to what she's trying to say and why she's trying to say, the situation in her own family, in the society where she lives in, so all of this will give us additional information as to why she's writing that poetry. So when we just read it the first time, it might not even make sense to us. But when we understand why she's writing it, what has influenced her to write it, so those are the things that we require to derive more pleasure, to understand more. So that's why I said, even if it is one work that you're doing, try to get an idea of the author, where the author lives, and what it is that influences the author. So in that case, it will all come together and give you more understanding of what it is that the author is trying to say.
And I have another question from
Yes.
Asha, ma'am. What is literary criticism approaches contribute to literature?
As I first, how do I put it, disclaimed that when I understood that this was a multidisciplinary audience, I did not want to go into the details of criticism. So from the beginning, I have only been looking at a layman's point of view, but I have given all the words, the technical terms, the jargon that has to be used when we literary students are going to analyze a work of art. So yes, literary criticism is another word for appreciating and analyzing a work. Now, if I am going to read a book, then I will, because I am a literature student and a literature teacher, then I would look for the influences of feminism, and then I would see if he or she is writing to say what he actually means, or does it need any interpretation? That is, do I have to deconstruct it, or do I have to read it in consonance with something else, or is this in it is a kind of a conversation between two authors, something like one lecture was given by Barth, and it was replied, another lecture, Foucault replied to him, and they were talking about the presence or absence of an author. So all these things will come to my mind because I am a literary student. Now, whereas a non-literary person might not be required to do all this with the name of literary criticism, literary interpretation. He will just look at it and say, okay, I understand what he's trying to say because I know the background. And along with that goes the enjoyment of that person. But for me, I will need all that to be able to understand and give a comprehensive answer to any questions asked on that particular work.
Okay, ma'am. There is another question from Tamil. How can the fancy and romantic imagination of Shelley and Keats be understood through practical approaches? Does this mean subjective understanding of poetry take a back step? She's asking a question.
Subjective understanding of poetry take a back step. See, I feel that poetry is always subjective. So what he wrote, he felt and he wrote. So what you read and you understand is what you think. But there is always a middle path, an interpretation as to what it is that he was actually trying to say. So fancy and imagination. If you do not have the facts of Shelley and Keats and the exact time or the order of what they were writing, I suppose you will just take the poem alone and run with it. But if you really want to know what it is, that why he has used that particular word, this particular imagery, then you have to dig into it. So you have to go and see what influenced him to write that poem, why he started writing that poem, and how he has ended it. So each and every word will bear investigation. Therefore, you will have to go deeper into it.
Okay. There is another question from Rajdarni. I'll read it out.
Yes.
Do you agree that the nuances with practical approaches are based on Western British touch that cannot be sufficient to judge indigenous and post-colonial texts? Because the indigenous literature is often very critical of Western approaches and understanding criticism from the Western world.
Yes, absolutely. That is why I repeat the social, historical, social, political history of the person So they would often look at it from their perspective, and they would claim that this does not reach up to the level of what we have said. So no, we cannot say something like that. For us, for our experience, it is different. How can it be the same here as well as there? Just because the language is theirs does not mean that the experience that we go through are the same. So I accept.
And there is the last question now. How the next generation will approach the literature after this pandemic?
Good question. I personally feel that there are a lot more of these Instagram poetries that have started coming out now. So as we move along, I think Insta poetry is also becoming part of literature. So as she mentioned when she was introducing me, one MA project that I had the pleasure to supervise was about an Insta poet. She has published her poems only in the Instagram, and which later she collected and she got it published. So I think this pandemic has given them pause because they were not asked to do anything else. They were forced to sit at home. So they were able to collect their thoughts and put it into Insta poetry. I think there has been a considerable increase in that because given that TikTok was taken off the by the Indian government. So I think poetry has increased. So yes, maybe this is how literature will, maybe when they start, they write Insta poetry and then they could probably refine and go on. So this is how I think the younger generation might proceed.
Thank you for answering the questions, ma'am.
My pleasure.
Now for the audience, do not forget to subscribe to our institution's YouTube channel where you'll be notified about the upcoming events. The feedback link will be provided in the chat box. Kindly fill and submit it for your participation certificates. The next webinar will be on coming Wednesday, 19th August. The webinar will be about linguistics and its nexus, followed by day 3 webinar on Friday, Literature Matters, Literary Appreciation and Interpretation. And now, being thankful is the greatest of all virtues. No program can take shape without a hardworking team. It was the dedication and enthusiasm of the organizers which makes the program a huge success. So, to thank all those who worked for the success of the first day of the webinar series, now I invite Mrs. Revati, Assistant Professor, Department of English, to propose the vote of thanks. Over to Revati, ma'am.
Thank you, Renita. It's my privilege to propose vote of thanks on this occasion. First and foremost, I thank God for the successful completion of this first webinar. I extend my gratitude to our guest, Dr. B.V. Saraswati ma'am, for the informative session on practical approaches to understand English literature. And it was very useful and interesting to know that these types of approaches will guide our students to learn and understand a subject in a better way. Thank you so much, ma'am. I also extend my sincere thanks to our management, our college secretary, Mr. N.R.D. Prem Kumar, joint secretary, Dr. P.R. Premchand, our principal, Dr. Kamala Balakrishnan, vice principal and IQAC coordinator, Mrs. Jafia Solomon, and my HOD, Mrs. Sajula, for giving this opportunity to connect and hold on together in this time of crisis. I also would like to thank all the viewers, participants, students, and professors from our college and other colleges for sparing your time and bringing out various provoking questions. We look forward to see you all in the upcoming sessions. Last but not least, I extend my gratitude to the technical team, Professor Yuvanesh, Professor Vinod, and Mr. Loganathan. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. We have come to the end of the session. For young learners, learning is a knowledge building process. I hope our day 1 webinar today has been an eye-opener to explore, enrich, and understand English literature with new approaches. Until we meet you in the next session on 19th August, this is Ms. Renita Angelin signing off from you all with Mrs. Devika Prema and Revati along with our department. Thank you. Thank you all.